Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's a beautiful morning here. This morning, I'm going to talk about an emerging costing method called activity-based costing, ABC in short. This is primarily for my Accounting 219 managerial accounting students at Alabama A&M University, and the discussions are based on Chapter 7 of Garrison, Noreen, and Brewer textbook. All right, so let's get to the point. ABC, what is ABC? Activity-based costing is a costing method that traces costs to activities. Underline, that traces costs to activities and uses activities as the basis of allocation of costs, as the basis of cost allocation. In other words, activities is at the center of activity-based costing. So if a product or service engages in more activities, if it involves a lot of costly activities and more of them, then it's going to be more costly. Versus if a product or service requires little activities or almost no, virtually no activities, or have cheaper or less costly, inexpensive activities, then that product or service is going to be less costly. Of course, we know that product cost and understanding of product cost, knowledge of product cost is so important for pricing and competition decisions. Even before launching a product, before diversification, before deciding, making an investment in a plant, we need to know how much we are going to be able to charge our services or products. Because based on that, we're going to have our revenue estimates, and based on those revenue forecasts, we're going to make cash flow forecasts and finally come up with an net present value or internal rate of return or whatever method we use to make our capital investment decisions. So remember, costing is not just cost accounting. Costing is pricing. Costing is a strategic decision. Costing is an important element that is at the center, or at least near the core of many long-term strategic decisions that an organization makes. If I don't know the price, if I don't, like the legendary investor Warren Buffett says, that if I don't know the price, then I'm not going to talk. That before any negotiation, he says we need to know what price we're going to talk about. So if you don't know the price of the products and services that you're going to offer in the market, how are you going to be doing your cash flow estimates? How will you do your capital budgeting decisions? How you are going to even make short-term pricing decisions? Okay, anyway, so that's leaving aside. Activity-based costing is an emerging costing method, one of the two emerging costing methods. The other one was variable costing. So they actually threw a successful challenge to the two traditional dominant costing methods called job order costing and process costing. So I'm gonna, when we glorify ABC this morning, you're gonna see we'll make comments and we'll be mean to job order costing and process costing at times. But don't forget that those two are still dominant because companies, organizations use those for external, at least for external reporting decisions, at least, to find out what the value of their closing inventory is, what the value of their cost of goods sold is. So in financial statements, we still see the dominance of job order costing and process costing. Virtually almost everywhere in financial accounting, you'll see absorption costing. But for decision making, which cost is more relevant? We find, like in microeconomics, and marginal costing or marginal utility decisions, or in many managerial accounting decisions, we know that managers like to think at the margin, and economists also like to think at the margin. So marginal costing and ABC, these two are two of the emerging costing methods that are quite predominant now in the United States and in Europe and Japan and India and China, almost everywhere in the world. So what is ABC? As I told, ABC is a costing method that traces activities, traces costs to activities, traces costs or resources to activities. No, costs are resources to activities, and then uses activities as the basis of cost allocation. Wonderful. It offers, as I said, an alternative to traditional costing methods in assigning overheads to products via activities. So take note of this. it offers an alternative to job order costing and process costing in at least assigning indirect costs, assigning overheads to products and services. All right. Most organizations that use ABC, this is extracted from the textbook, that most companies who use ABC, they use two sets of costing methods, one for financial reporting purposes and the other, which is traditionally ABC, which is predominantly ABC, for internal decision making. Let's make a comparison between the two, ABC versus traditional absorption costing methods. Basically, ABC versus job and process costing together. So ABC is taking head on. You can see ABC is fighting against two of the bulls, two of the real strong players in managerial accounting. All right, so what happens here is that under ABC, non-manufacturing as well as manufacturing costs. Non-manufacturing meaning selling and distribution and general and administrative costs, as well as manufacturing costs like material labor, can be assigned to products, but only on a cause and effect basis. So this is what ABC believes. It says we don't just need to assign direct ones to products and indirect ones to periods. See, remember in one of my first videos, we talked about cost concepts and definitions. There said you could classify all costs into product costs and period costs. So how did we define product costs? What was our product cost? Our product cost was material, labor, plus manufacturing overhead. Remember, up to manufacturing overhead. And then non-manufacturing ones used to be called period costs. But we see that in manufacturing overhead, there are many that are not actually, that don't vary with sensitivity of, like with ups and downs of number of products or number of units. Many manufacturing, or as a matter of fact, actually most manufacturing overheads are actually indirect. Well, I mean, had they not been indirect, they wouldn't be called overhead, but they do not have a direct link with the number of units or with the products. We'll see very soon. So we believe that non-manufacturing as well as manufacturing costs could be assigned to products, but only on the basis of a cause and effect relationship. So if you cause it, then we're going to assign it on you. We're going to assign it on you. Remember that Beyonce, all the single ladies, if you like it, you're going to put a ring on it. So here we say that if you cause it, if you cause the costs to go up or down, then that's related to you. That's going to be your activity, and you're going to pay for it. So number two was some manufacturing costs may be excluded from product costs. Yes, because they're organization sustaining costs. They have no direct bearing with the production process. Not even indirect bearing. I mean, they're like beyond the individual products. Of course, let's say Apple, for example, Apple Inc. has several products, not too many, but several: iPad, iMac, iPhone, iPod, and all those. All right. So let's say there is a research and development, or there's some supervisory roles. There are some designing engineers. There are some architects. What do they do? They don't necessarily deploy. They don't necessarily work for a particular product. If you are in a product team, then of course that is your overhead, like product meaning iPhone or iPad or iMac. But if you are more general, like if you're the head of research, then what do? We still call it manufacturing overhead because part of it could be at a manufacturing facility. So we are trying to say that some manufacturing costs could be actually excluded from product costs. And then we say numerous cost pools are used, each of which is allocated to products and other cost objects using its own unique measure of activity. So a number of several cost pools are going to be used to gather all the costs. And now look at this. How do we treat non-manufacturing costs in ABC? Okay. Non-manufacturing costs under ABC, the traditional costing methods, they assign manufacturing costs to products and non-manufacturing ones to period. Clear? Manufacturing, product, so material, labor, and manufacturing overhead together, they're all product costs, and then selling and distribution and general admin, they are period costs. But here we say non-manufacturing costs, e.g. S&D and G&A, general and administrative, not necessarily assigned, well, under traditional ones, they're not necessarily assigned, they're not assigned to products. We know that, they're not assigned to products. But here we're going to say that in ABC, we're going to do it. In ABC, we're not going to draw a line below manufacturing overhead. So if some selling and distribution costs are directly caused by products like shipping, like packing, like order processing, like materials handling, like post-sale service, these are going to be product costs. Because in order for you to, in order for us to sell that product, we need to have these activities. Because sales doesn't end at the checkout, at the checkout. Okay. All right. So in ABC, what do you do? Any cost, read this, any cost, manufacturing or non-manufacturing. See the or. Any cost, manufacturing or non-manufacturing, is assigned to products so long as the cost concerned is caused by the product. So any cost, I repeat, manufacturing or non-manufacturing. Non-manufacturing meaning selling and distribution, general and admin. Of course, manufacturing means material, labor, and manufacturing overhead, like machines and equipment, their depreciation, and the labor supervision and all those. So manufacturing or non-manufacturing can be assigned, let's say, or is going to be assigned to products so long as that cost is caused by the product. So that means direct, of course, manufacturing ones, like material and labor are going to be there, then direct non-manufacturing. So if it's non-manufacturing, but if it's direct, then it does go. And then if it's indirect non-manufacturing costs would go into the product cost if it is caused by the product. So in summary, we say that ABC product cost, so that's the formula, ABC product cost is equal to all direct costs that can be traced to products. ABC product cost is equal to all direct costs like material, labor, and direct expenses, equipment depreciation, labor holiday pay, labor health insurance. All these would be assigned, would be traced to products. So if all direct costs that are traced to products, of course, insurance and healthcare, they cannot be traced, but they are caused. Then, and all indirect costs are also going to be assigned to products if they are caused by the product. So that cause and effect relationship is very important. Again, if you like it, you got to put a ring on it. So if you cause it, you got to absorb it. You got to take responsibility. You got to include it in your cost. The need to distinguish between manufacturing and non-manufacturing costs disappears under ABC, because manufacturing, non-manufacturing distinction is not relevant here. What is relevant is whether you involve that particular activity, whether the activity is essential to delivering that product, to producing that product, to producing the service or not. If you go through those activities, then you pay for those activities. Now, of course, estimating the cost of a particular activity is one of the biggest challenges here in ABC, but we're going to get to that later. So here's a comparison between traditional and ABC. You can see under traditional, we have a problem that all budgeted overhead costs, you can see why ABC has emerged. And it has emerged on one of the weaknesses or some of the weaknesses of the traditional costing methods. One of the things that happens under traditional costing is that we use material and labor as product cost. Then what do? We apply overhead. Remember, overhead applied, not necessarily total manufacturing overhead, but we divide total budgeted manufacturing overhead by a number of allocation base, like machine hour or labor hour, and then have an hourly rate, and then apply it onto our products based on how many hours labor work here, or how many hours machines are occupied. Now, see there. Now, there are many activities. When we, in the numerator, we bring all, we say all budgeted manufacturing overhead, or all budgeted overhead costs, especially manufacturing ones. And when you bring in all, that means it is possible that any or some costs which are not directly related to the products would be assigned to products or product costs via the POHR. POHR means predetermined overhead rate. Because once that predetermined overhead rate is known, like in collision repair shops, for example, every hour a mechanic works on your car, they're going to charge you $150 or a certain amount of money. So in that $150, there may be a whole bunch of things that have nothing to do with my car. So the price or the cost of repairing, fixing a collision is actually could be way different, altogether different from what we see in our cost reports. Anyway, while in ABC, what do you do? Two types of manufacturing overhead costs are not assigned to products. Two types of even within manufacturing, you can see two of them are not assigned to products. One of them is organization sustaining cost, and the other one is idle capacity cost or unused capacity costs. Now, let me show you a big problem with predetermined overhead rates. Let's say in my house, I make these videos, and for every minute of a video length, I charge $10. Because my total to sustain this facility cost me, say, $1,000, and in those $1,000, I can only make 100 minutes of videos using the $1,000. So that means for every minute I make a video, someone has to pay me $10. Now, what if I actually could make, using the $1,000, I could make actually 300 minutes of videos? So aren't the videos that I'm making, aren't they actually loaded for resources that they're not responsible for? They're not responsible for. So if in a particular department, say because of lack of demand, and even at universities or at hospitals or airlines, if a route is very popular, they have a lot of activity, so you have a predetermined overhead rate, so you're going to keep applying those, say based on number of passengers. So being popular, being busy is going to be a curse instead of being a blessing. You see my point? If a department or if a floor is busy, like they have more labor hours, more machine hours, then we're going to assign more costs to them. Then somewhere else there is slack, idle capacity. Well, so I'm paying for their idle capacity because they use, say, on the same floor or same size floor, on another floor, they use only, say, 70 hours. I use 100 hours. It's not my fault that my product is more popular. So fair costing does not always occur under the traditional costing methods. ABC attempts to make it more fair. ABC, once we discuss ABC, you'll see that ABC leads to a fairer computation of unit costs, a fairer computation of product costs. We may not be able to save your costs, but we will be able to pinpoint the heroes from villains, the good ones from not so good ones. We're going to be able to distinguish the men from boys. Men from boys. One of my New Zealand colleagues used to say that. All right. So here is a diagram that's extracted from the textbook, directly from the textbook. You can see here, the top half is about the traditional absorption costing systems, means job and process costing. So we have manufacturing overhead, we have non-manufacturing overhead there. Manufacturing overhead could be direct, indirect. Non-ones could be indirect, direct, or direct or indirect. So the manufacturing overhead, whether direct or indirect, we assign both of them to products, you can see, of failure. As long as it's manufacturing, whether they're direct or indirect, we don't care. we assign both of them to the products. The non-manufacturing, whether they're direct or indirect, we assign both of them to period. We call them period costs. So the product is not made responsible for those. ABC, on the other hand, says, look at the same manufacturing and the non-manufacturing, direct and indirect. It says, let the direct ones go to the product, and from non-manufacturing, if there are some direct ones, let them go to products as well. So you have two product costs here, not both here, two product costs, one originating from manufacturing overhead and the other originating from non-manufacturing overhead costs. As long as they're direct, means they have a direct link with the products, they are going to be product costs. Product costs means they're going to be assigned to the unit cost of the product or service. And then the indirect ones, be it manufacturing or non-manufacturing, we call them period costs. See, we call them overhead and we call them period costs, as long as they're indirect. So let's get to the center of ABC. We have, before actually designing or implementing ABC, we find that there are 5 types of activities that organizations engage in. Or you can classify all activities into these 5. You could have product level activities, unit level activities, then batch level activities, then product level activities, then organization level activities, customer level activities, and finally, organization sustaining activities. So again, starting with the units, unit level, like a unit is, let's say one of our students is a unit. And then the batch, your class, 16 people, 25 people, 30 people, or 300, depending on the class size. In New Zealand, we had some courses, some classes with more than nearly 300 was the cap, 300 students, huge lecture halls, beautiful facilities. But in the US, we have smaller classrooms and smaller class sizes, more direct hands-on education is sometimes possible here. Anyway, so unit level, so unit is our student, then batch is our class, then the product. So you are Mike Henry or Jim Carrey, one of our students, then you are in accounting 219, and then the product is not accounting 219, product is, say, an engineer or a systems engineer or a mechanical engineer. So that's a product, like our BBA or our MBA or a bachelor's BA in economics is a product. And then you have customer level activity, like for one customer right throughout from the beginning to the end. As long as you are a customer, then we'll have some activities around you, no matter how many courses or what courses you do. And then some activities to sustain the organization sustaining activities. For example, we have at Alabama A&M now, we have AACSB accreditation. So having an accreditation is a wonderful thing, isn't it? But maintaining it is like the price you pay for. They say that vigilance is the price of independence. So we have to be vigilant all the time to see whether we are able to maintain it so that we don't have to have the indignity of losing it. So being liked by everyone, being popular, being an excellent performer, you set a high standard is important, is very good, but then sustaining it is a challenge. So there's a lot of activities, like, so the money and resources that you spend to maintain that accreditation is, of course, is not easy to trace to an individual student who is doing accounting 219 or accounting 203. But the benefit that comes in from accreditation or from reputation of our degrees is indirect. They benefit from it. I know they're they're happy to pay for it, but it should be left as indirect. So we have these 5 levels of activity, and remember, the organization sustaining activities, those activities, so activity costs are not added to unit costs, product costs. Well, so there's the warming up. There's the main discussion or the big picture that ABC is an emerging costing method of product costing or service costing, where activities is at the center. Any product or service that requires more activities, more revisions, they're going to be more costly. So if you make us do the same thing twice, we're going to charge you more. You'll be one of our more costly students. If we have, say, 4 midterms versus 2 midterms, or if we have a student who needs like 50 hours of one-on-one coaching versus another student who requires only five hours, although we would like to be fair on all our students and equitable, but in terms of costing, of course, it's undeniable that the student who requires 50 hours of our one-on-one counseling is a more costly student. I mean, it's not the student's fault that they're more costly, that they need more help. That's welcome, that's why we are for. That's our mission, to meet you where you are. But in terms of costs, if we do some back office calculations, of course, Mike Henry is more costly because I have to spend 50 hours with Mike Henry. Okay, so the same thing works in organizations. I shouldn't be using student examples because all our students are simply wonderful, but that is true for every company, isn't it? All their customers are great, but of course there are more costly customers and less costly customers. We're going to see it in customer profitability analysis. We can use ABC to identify individually which ones of you are the best in terms of giving us comfort, giving us leisure, giving us profit. So of course the ones who don't need us. But if you didn't need us, then you wouldn't be here, isn't it? So we like that you need us, because that's what we do. That's what our job is. Anyway, so designing an ABC system. How do you design? First of all, there are 3 essential requirements for an ABC system to work. Number 1 is top management must support it. And number 2, they must ensure, top management that is, they must ensure that ABC is linked to performance evaluation, excuse me, to employee performance evaluation, their evaluation and rewards system, their rewards and punishment system. Give me a minute. Because unless there is a link between anything you do and your performance and how you're rewarded or punished, then you so soon realize that my company is not serious about it. So we better leave it. We better not pay much attention to it. One great professors of managerial accounting called Professor Otley, David Otley from Lancaster University. He said in one of his presentations in Wellington, New Zealand, I think about 17 years ago, 2003, he said that if you don't measure it, he said, you get what you measure. Sometimes whether you get what you deserve or you get what you pay for. So he said that you get what you measure. It means if you measure something, if you measure me in terms of, say, student grades, then I'm going to deliver student grades. If you measure me in terms of publications, I'm going to be supplying publications. If you measure me in terms of number of hours, for how long I'm in office, how long I'm visible, then I'm going to offer you visibility. You see? Because people pretty quickly react to incentives. Very incentive-driven species we are. All right. So 3 essential characteristics. One was top management must be supportive. Second was they must ensure that it is linked to the rewards and punishment system. And the third is a cross-functional team must be put in place. You have to draw from different functions. Cross-functional team must be put in place to design and implement ABC, because we need a lot of information about which activity requires how long and how many activities, how many distinguishable activities are there, so that none of the important activities are missed. And at the same, on the one hand, we don't miss anything, and on the other hand, we don't want to miss the forest for the trees. So we don't want to go into so much detail that we lose sight of the forest. There is so much into weeds and thing. All right, so this is an activity-based costing model. See what happens here? We have cost objects, products and services. That's a cost object. Then you have activities, because products and services require activities, and activities require resources. See, the relationship between products and services and resources is not direct. It is via activities. And then, of course, resources are the same as costs. Resource is equal to cost. So I designed this, I drew this small diagram here. You can see what ABC does. ABC says products, meaning products and services, they don't consume resources. They consume activities. Like if I go to a hospital today, I'm not going to be bringing in any equipment or any doctor or any nurse with me. I would need services. I would need testing. I would need counseling. I would need, say, some procedures. I would need to be taken an X-ray of. So I'd be going through a lot of activities depending on the complexity or the condition that I'm in. So the difference between a less costly visit versus a costly visit is the activities. You see, it's not the medicine, it's the amount of time and resources that they need to treat you. And if you need more activities like 50 X-rays versus 5 X-rays, 50 stitches versus no stitches, MRI versus no MRI, angiogram versus no angiogram, stenting versus no stenting, bypass surgery versus no bypass surgery, therapy versus no therapy. So the more activities they need to go through, or the more activities you need to go through, would involve more resources. So our patients don't actually consume resources directly. They involve activities, because a customer is a bunch of activity. Like a child, a child is a bunch of activity. You have to spend so much time and so much energy to give him a bath, to give him weaning when they're 4 months old, to give them the first solid food, then keep them company when they don't want to sleep, then take them for regular visits, for vaccination. I mean, there's a whole host of things, activities. The more activities the child engages you, the more costly their child is, the more full on, the more. All right. So traditional ones used to say that products are a function of costs. Or cost is a function of products. The more products, more cost. But here we say that the more activities, more costs. More activities, more costs. So the relationship between product and costs is via activities in ABC. This is traditional. We bypass activities. All right. So that leads us to the steps in implementing ABC. ABC implementation steps. What do we have here? Step number 1 is define activities. So you sit down, we have a consulting team or ABC designing and implementation team. Their first job is to define activities. Like for universities, we say teaching is an activity. Grading is another activity. Counseling is another activity. And advising is another activity. So if you come and visit my office 4 times a week for, say, tutoring versus other students or someone else who never visits, if we are too mean, actually at the university, we like the one who visits us 4 times better than the one who doesn't, because that's when we can impart our knowledge or our influence. But if you don't visit at all, then you are less costly. That's true. But you're also a potential risk for us, because you don't know what you're doing, what you're learning. Exam is not the only way of testing anyway. So we have testing, like grading, testing, setting exam. So we have a lot of activity. Now, when I say setting exam is not a unit level activity, because I set an exam for the whole class. Can you see? Like teaching is not a unit level activity. We do it for the whole class. So that's the batch level activity. But when I offer individual one-on-one counseling or one-on-one tutoring, then that's the unit level activity. Or when I grade your scripts, that's the unit level activity. The more units, the more costly. All right, so we have to define those activities. Think of a hospital, think of a bank, like account opening, loan processing, receiving deposits, then dispensing checks, receiving money orders, making international transfers or wire transfers, processing home loans, processing personal loans, processing any loan application, a lot of. So we define those activities is the first step. So define activities, then activity cost pools. Activity cost pools means which cost pool supports that activity, which cost pool supports the activity, like teaching would be related to faculty salary. So that's the cost pool. Activity would be teaching. And then the activity measures. How are you going to measure the activity? Is it one loan or all loan? Is it like one order? So if I receive like fax machines, whether if I receive fax messages or email messages or checks, then whether a check is $3.50 or $3.5 million, it doesn't make much of a difference, does it? Of course, the $3.5 million one would need more verification, more care. But a check is a check. So between $50 and $75, or between $700 and $70, there is not much of a difference. So how you measure? So check processing would say just number of checks. Writing letters, number of letters. Grading scripts, number of scripts. But then when you have PhD research students, or when you have to work with you on your essays, then we could not treat. We couldn't say one size fits all. Like not all essays are of same rigor. So you could have a term paper versus you could have a small assignment, take-home assignment versus an in-class assignment, a quiz versus a long, test. So define the activity measure. So the first one is definition, all the definitions. Step number 1, define activities, activity cost pools, and activity measures. And then second is assign overhead costs to activity cost pools. Now that you have the activity cost pools, assign your overhead cost to those pools. So pools would be like small buckets where we accumulate those resources, those costs. Okay, like puddles, puddles where rainwater accumulates. So assign overhead costs to those activity cost pools. Number 3, calculate activity costs. Calculation of activity cost means now once you have an activity cost, once you know which activity is going to which cost pools, then we have say grading or teaching as one activity. You can find, okay, teaching involves all these different resources. The total cost of teaching as a cost is say $2 million. Total teaching 8,000 students. Okay, so calculate activity costs, not unit activity cost, the total activity cost, and the activity, say all counseling together, at University of Counseling, or health and wellness, or sports and recreation, or football coaching. If there's an activity, or all coaching is maybe one activity, then find out an activity cost. And then assign overhead costs to cost objects. What you're going to do is once you have the activity cost, you're going to divide it by number of activities of that particular activity. So then we'll have unit activity cost, like how much it costs to offer one lecture, unit activity cost. And then we're going to find, okay, this course requires 40 lectures. And this course has, say, 15 students. So 40 lectures times each lecture cost plus other costs, then divided by number of students. Then that's what it costs us to teach you. Well, so assign overhead costs to cost object. Cost objects are products and services. And then prepare management reports. All right. So now, how do you do that? This is called the first stage allocation. What I call it a resource activity matrix. Resource activity matrix. So we have resources. We said there are products and services and there are resources. And in the middle, we have activity. So we have resources R1, resource 1, resource 2, resource 3. So in our department, we have resources like professors, secretaries, facilities, rooms, maybe some machines. These are our resources. And then we have a certain number of activities. Activities, I call it A1, A2, A3, A4. So that's your activities, and these are resources. What you have to do, your first job is to find. So this is what needs a lot of consultation, a lot of rounds of consultation. Like Delphi method would be a good one, where you keep deliberating until you come to a consensus. So how much of resource 1 is spent on activity 1? Say at a bank, say this is manager's salary. This is the manager. And activity 1 is account opening. How much time how much of say the branch manager's time is spent on account opening? Probably nothing. So it will be 0%, or maybe 1% or 2%. But then there are some performance evaluation meetings, or there are some loan decisions, or there are some approvals, then that requires a lot of managerial time. So if you have activities horizontally and resources vertically, then you will see that R1 actually supports a lot of activities and R2 supports a lot of activities. Not every resource has to support every activity. That's not a necessity, as long as you know where all the resources are deployed. So if I'm a resource, say I teach accounting and I'm only active in just say 3 types of activities. Say I never grade exams, or I never supervise PhDs, or I never engage in any sports or recreation, I never take you out to picnics, then my resources are not used for that activity. All right, so these are your resources. These are activities. So our first job is to complete this resource activity matrix and make sure that none of the resources are left out, and none of the activities are left out. You could combine some activities, similar activities into one, because we don't need 50,000 activities, and we don't need 50,000 different types of resources. That would defeat the purpose. So similar activities like materials handling could have a lot of intricate activities there, say customer handling, or appeals, or maybe there is a dispute handling. Within dispute handling, there could be registration, there could be noting, there could be examination, there could be inquiry, there could be making phone calls, a lot of activities. But, or say maybe loan documentation, or even loan closing, or another one called underwriting, loan underwriting, loan approval, loan application processing, or application reviewing. So these are different activities that requires a lot of people's resources, a lot of machines resources, maybe even rent, like space resource. So this is our resource activity matrix, where we are going to assign all these resources to different activities. The first one is in terms of percentages, and the second page would be in terms of dollars. So if you have resource 1 is say $100, so $100 times 25 goes here. So we multiply that column, the dollar column, by all these percentages. That means A1 is going to be $25, A2 is going to be $25, and A3 would be $50, because the resource was $100. If the resource was $300, then we take 25% of 300, 25% of 300, and 50% of 300. So that would be 75, 75, and 150. All right. So convert the first, you do it in percentages. Second, you convert it into dollars. Once you have the percent, so dollar conversion would be a simple Excel exercise. Simply multiply each cell by the resource total. Then at the bottom of it, we're going to have a total activity cost. See, at the bottom, once you have the dollar one, not the percentage, once we replace these percentages by dollars, then add this. This cell is going to have the total cost of activity number 2, the total cost of activity number 1. So A1 cost, A2 cost, A3 cost. And then say A1 is say loan processing, and if we process say 5,000 loans, the total loan processing cost divided by 5,000 gives us the cost of processing one loan. Say at a restaurant, we after every group of people, after they finish their dinner, after we set up the table again. So table setting up is an activity. Now, if you can identify the total activity cost and then find out how many times we have to set up the whole table, that's the setup cost to set up a table. So if you know the number, of course it's possible to know the number, like maybe 30, 40 per night, so throughout the year, but we already know the activity cost. So activity cost of say setting the tables, or making coffee, or writing a receipt for the customer, if that's an activity, then this would give you the activity total activity cost, and they divided by number of those activities. That would give you unit activity cost. So that's what we do here. Garrison calls it activity rate. I call it UAC, unit activity cost. So the initial one was activity cost, and divided by number of units would give you unit activity cost. All right. So calculation of activity rate is total cost of that activity, or total activity cost, divided by number of that particular activity, the extent of that activity, how often, how many occasions, how frequent that activity is. Once we have the activity costs or unit activity costs, now we are flying, because you can now assign those costs to particular products or services. That's what we say, assign overhead costs to cost objects. Cost object sounds more like an abstract thing. Cost object is product or service. Cost object means things that make us incur costs. Like at our university, you are our cost object. Students, at home, children, number of people, they're the cost objects. More people, the more cost. Of course, more pleasure too, more happiness, but it's costly too. All right. So now we do the second stage allocation when you assign overhead costs to cost objects. So we're basically doing like, okay, iMac, for example, iMac as a product, iMac receives, say, 30,000 phone calls, or 20 design revisions, 40 certain activity goes, all the iMacs together. They go through all these activities. So now we have allocated or assigned those little unit activity costs to products. Initially, product, don't go to units yet. So product, if we have 4 products, iMac, iPad, iPod, and iPhone, then those 4 products, the product cost. So let's assign those costs to individual, assign overhead costs to those individual cost objects. And what did we say here? Second stage allocation, we said products would involve different levels of activities. Yeah, of course, every product, as I said, iMac would need, say, 300 of this activity, 400 of that another activity, 1 of another activity, and all those. So products would involve different levels of activities or different units of volumes of activities, and hence product cost would be sum of all those activity costs. So if our BBS students or Bachelor of Economics, Econ Bachelor students, if they involve like 40,000 hours of teaching or 400 hours of teaching, 50 or 5,000 total gradings, or say 400 advising sessions and 300 counseling sessions and all. If you know the cost of each of those activities, we can simply find out the cost of our economics program. And once you know the cost of the economics program, we divide it by number of students you have in economics. So that's the cost of one student. And if we know that every student takes on average 12 to 15 credits, so just divide it by 13, and we get the cost of teaching you 1 unit, 1 credit. All right. So now that you have done it, you now know the cost of iMac, all iMacs, the cost of all iPads, cost of all iPods, and cost of all iPhones, then divided by number of iMacs and iPods and iPads and iPhones you produce. That would be your cost of 1 iPhone. But before that, don't forget that in ABC, we don't deal with material and labor and those primary costs. So ABC is primarily an overhead alternative, but it independently can calculate the total product cost because it just brings in material and labor that's easily traceable. Remember, our whole idea was to establish a clearer link. If I need, say 3 haircuts every say I'm on a television presentation program that I need have to have makeups and haircuts every 3 days, versus a professor who doesn't care about haircuts for 6 months. So if haircut is an activity, and if I need that more often, then I'm costly. If that activity is costly, which I think it is. All right. So now, how do we prepare management reports? Management reports are like product profitability and customer profitability. So we have a product called iPhone, and we now know that, okay, in a given year, how many iPhones we sell, how many iPhones we manufacture, how many we sell, and what are their costs. So we can find out individual costs of individual products, like segment reporting. Okay. We can also do it the same for customers, individual customers. So now ABC benefits. We are nearly there. ABC benefits is here. I find it fair, at least an attempt to finding out a fairer basis of costing, a fairer way of costing. So fair assignment of costs, because nothing idle goes in there, nothing that you don't use is going to be, you're not going to be made responsible for anything for things that you don't use. So if you don't go through certain activities, then you don't pay for it. As simple as that. If you like it, you put a ring on it. If you don't like it, you have no problem. I'm not going to make you liable. Will not be shameless to ask you to put a ring on us. All right. So it gives a fair assessment, a fair assignment of costs. Number two, it's easier to identify weak links. Say we had 5 products of 5 different programs, and we are doing an average overhead allocation, because universities, hospitals, banks, airlines, overhead is the biggest source of expense. So if you can bypass overhead, if you can somehow push your overhead to someone else, then no one would know that you're the troublemaker. Because you're causing the trouble, but someone else is making the noise. You see? Squeaky wheel. We pay attention to squeaky wheel. So if you are not actually costing us more, why should we charge you more? And I think students or patients, bank clients, they would like it. So if you go, for example, if you go for a $300 loan or $300 overdraft, and if we say a processing fee is going to be $500, versus for a loan of worth $2 million, the processing fee is also $500. Loan processing fee is usually standard. Account fees, usually standard. I find it arbitrary. It's not smart, because it should be transactions based. It should be volume based. It should be how much activities they engage us in. If your account is primarily dormant, if there are no activities, if you don't bother us, then you should enjoy a low-cost account. Even passengers, airline passengers, some passengers, they would make you tired. On a 12-hour flight, they'd call you 15 times. You'd have to treat them really, really like a patient. Okay, so activities are important. Think of a passenger who needs a wheelchair. My mother does too, but I have sympathy for that. But it is costly, undeniable that it's costly. If I need a stretcher, if I need an assisted trip, if I need, say, an individual test taking, sometimes we have testing rooms, and to accommodate you, we need to assign an individual just to proctor you. While I could have had you in my classroom. So the fact that you involve or you engage more, and some countries, I tell you, in some countries, students or patients, of course in hospitals, patients who need more care, because care is costly. More care is more cost. All right. So in some countries, they actually pay you for those activities. Like in Switzerland, I knew that if you have a special needs child, and if you take care of him at your own home, by being a parent, then government pays you money, because you are indirectly assisting the system by taking care of your own child. All right. So it makes it, as I said, easier to identify weak links. So the products that you need to drop, or that the regions that you need to not even go to, or the customers that you would like to drop, you can find it better from ABC-based costing. And then process improvement. Once we know the weak links, we can take care of it. If we know which ones are not, which ones are hemorrhaging, not giving us any profit, and don't promise to give that in the future either. So those ones you could even drop. So it makes your process improve improvement, more efficient, more possible, and then efficient prioritization, I call it, or efficient priority setting. Efficient prioritization means if I know my product costs, if I know my customer costs, my category costs, then I would know which ones to pamper, which ones deserve discounts, which ones deserve, say, special discounts, which ones deserve a lounge, which ones like today I was looking at I was looking to book a flight, reschedule a flight on Qatar Airways, and they have a WhatsApp number that you can chat and have the service. But then they said, well, this is only for platinum and gold members. I mean, without being one, I had this service just a couple of weeks ago, but now they say that you have to be a particular type of a member. So can you see? They know that you are their more profitable customer. So that's why they are offering this free service to you. So there must be a mechanism. But if their assessment is, if their identification is wrong, let's say we all are equally costly, but they just arbitrarily chose you, then the company is going to one day lose, because many of you know, this I know that, well, I may not be a gold or platinum customer, but I was a more as offering a lot of revenue, as buying more of their products. So I'd be disgruntled and I'd leave. So efficient prioritization is important, because your priority setting sends a very strong message to the customers, to your people, to your employees, to your students. If you put someone in a top priority, they feel special, then they deliver, they're more likely to deliver. And if they deserve it, I'm not saying that you need to treat everyone special. If they deserve it, then you have to do that. You're better off doing it, isn't it? If you deserve an A, and if I don't give you an A, if you deserve a C, and if I don't give you a C, then our system has a problem. We need to reward the good deeds and punish not so good ones. We don't want to punish anyone. Anyway, all right, so that's it for tonight. It's still morning. That's it for this morning. I will come back with a problem solving with one of the problems, maybe the foundational 15 or one of the review problems or one comprehensive problem from ABC soon in a day or two. So stay tuned and keep watching, and let me know if you have questions. I'm sure I'd like you to have questions. The discussion room is open, and I'm gonna start answering your questions. So, all right. Thank you for your attention. I hope you like it. See you soon. Bye.